You are listening to Missed Apex Formula E. We are charged up and ready to go. Welcome back to the Missed Apex Formula E podcast. I'm your host, Chris Stevens. We are back with another deep dive interview. We hope you've been enjoying the ones that we've done so far. Today promises to be another fantastic insight because it is with someone who has been in Formula E since day one. And it is somebody who's always been fighting at the front of the field, Mr. Sam Bird. Sam, welcome to the show.
Hi, Chris. How's it going?
Yeah, absolutely wonderful. Tell us, how has the season been going so far for you?
The season's been, for me, promising so far. Okay, I don't have the points on the board that I would necessarily want, especially after a race. The second race in Diriyah was a bit frustrating for me, but there's a lot of promise and potential there with the team and with the package. So that's what excites me going into race 4.
So how has the transition from Jaguar to McLaren been? Obviously, it's quite a big transition, a whole new team, whole new car for you to learn as well with a different powertrain. How's that been?
Fairly seamless, to be honest. Everybody welcomed me with open arms. Yes, there were differences with regards to some techniques and some of the terminology that's used. But essentially, after 10 years of Formula E, everybody's trying to do the same tricks. So it just boiled down to me getting on with my job, working well with the engineers, the crew, the mechanics, the PR team, trying to tell them what I'd learned from my previous team. There were some things that they did slightly differently and implementing them here to try and ensure that we got a little bit better.
And of course, you've been reunited with your engineer from Envision and Virgin Racing, Stephen Lane. Is that like sort of coming back home for you, being back with him? Hashtag eyes forward.
Yeah, eyes forward. Yeah, he's a really good guy. Somebody that I trust. You know, you need to really trust your engineer, and get on with them on a really. You need to be mates with your engineer, or at least I think I do. That's how I work at my best. Like, we've got to be able to have a laugh together and be serious together. So I think the relationship works extremely well.
So obviously your time in McLaren, although it's been very short, already looks a lot more promising than the end of your tenure at Jaguar. So I wonder, what is it you're getting at McLaren that maybe you weren't getting at Jaguar that's allowed you to be, back up at the front of the field?
Say there's anything necessarily that I'd want to necessarily share publicly, to be honest. I'm just very happy. I'm very happy with the people that I'm working with. I feel like there's an awful lot of fairness. Everything is shared. Everything. It's a really good working environment. I'm very happy to be here.
So, just going into the new season with McLaren, was there a big adjustment that you had to make? Because we were talking to Jake Dennis a little bit earlier, and he was telling us all about how software can make all the difference in the world. And, we have drivers like Antonio Felix da Costa, who's suddenly really struggling because maybe the software isn't suiting his driving style. So did you have a similar adjustment you had to make when you moved teams?
Yeah, and I probably went through a similar thing that Antonio's going through with my previous team when something's developed one way and it might not suit the other driver necessarily, but Antonio's a mega driver. But yeah, software is key in this championship. Of course, the hardware at the rear has got to be top as well, but along with that, it needs to be very, very strong with regard to the software. There are teams up and down this paddock that are so good with regard to their systems. Their engineers, their software engineers, very, very clever people, making sure that the car is reacting and acting in the best ways at any given moment on any given corner radius type. So, yeah, we need to strive to be at the top of our game in that field. Obviously, the car's homologated now. We can't change the hardware. For next year, we can. I'm very excited about what we can bring to the table next year, but we've got an awful lot of racing to do yet this year.
Yeah, of course, McLaren and the Nissan team, of course, you guys are a customer team in Nissan. do seem to be like dark horses, almost, particularly for this season. And I'm sure there's a lot of anticipation about the next homologation cycles. How do you, as a driver, input your feedback into the team and make sure you're getting what you need out of the car?
Um, for me, it's important to give, if you're going to give feedback that is not necessarily positive, you can give negative feedback, but in a positive way. So instead of saying, guys, car's slow, it's horrible to drive, you could say, I feel like if we do this, I feel like we'll make an improvement in that area. So it gives you, it's the way that you word it, and then that's far more constructive. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So not just coming in and saying, "Oh, this is absolutely terrible. We need to change this." It's
There's been times
almost
where I've done that,
Christmas.
and you can sense that there's people in the team, and this affects every team. These men and women are working on these cars 5, 6, 7 days a week, sometimes more than 10 hours a day. It's their absolute everything. And when you come in on a weekend, you've done a few days of simulation, maybe a few meetings here and there, and then you come in and just say that it's rubbish. It's no good for them to hear. It's counterproductive, and they've put that heart, heart and soul into this project. The last thing they want to be hearing is that. So be positive and work with them to make it better.
Is that something you've learned during your time in Formula E?
I learned that earlier on in my career. Didn't necessarily follow the advice, but it's a much better way of working. Work smarter, not harder.
Absolutely. I'd like to take you back in time to right at the very beginning of Formula E, because I do wonder when did Formula E first appear on your radar as something you'd be interested in
Oh,
driving in?
Formula E first appeared on my radar when it was pretty apparent that Toto Wolff wanted Toto Wolff people within Mercedes, and I was a Ross Brawn person. So I kind of ended my campaign in GP2 being the runner-up in GP2 with 5 wins that year and not having a job at the end of it. So I was looking at other options, and the only real viable option for me at the time was this new thing called Formula E. There wasn't really anything else. And I had a meeting with somebody from Virgin Racing. It was called Virgin Racing at the time. And fortunately enough, I got the gig. I think myself and my teammate at the time, Jaime Alguersuari, were like the third and fourth drivers to be named that would be doing Formula E full time. It was a massive leap of faith into the dark. I didn't know what would happen. And 10 years on, I'm still here. Really, really happy that I've been a part of the journey for so long. I think that it is a genuine career path now for drivers to sit in Formula E for multiple years. So very, very blessed and happy that I've been here, been successful enough. There's still a script in the story to be written though, and I think it could be a very successful one.
Oh, I hope so. I wonder, do you think that Formula E at this point has managed to garner more talent and a stronger field of drivers, let's say, than Formula One, for example? There's
I,
always a
do,
comparison.
I don't think that you can firstly compare that. What I think Formula E is quite good at though is giving drivers a chance. I think that in some ways F1, because it's so extreme with regards to its rarity to get a job in Formula One, I feel like there's not necessarily the opportunities available all the time to young drivers. And Formula E is happy to, bring them in and give them a drive. A lot of drivers have come from GP2 now straight into Formula E, and some have sunk, some have swam. That's part and parcel of this championship. It's very difficult, but it's hard to say on that one. Hard to say. I think Formula One is the pinnacle of motorsport. It's the most watched, most followers, most money involved. But we do pack a mean punch in Formula E, and everybody knows who works in this championship just how difficult it is. And I think fans are starting to realize that as well.
just to pick up on how Formula E has changed, what was the first test like back in
Oh my God, the
2014?
first test, the Donington test in May, I think it was May, yeah, May 2014. Um, wow, nobody knew what to do, what to expect. It was wet. The first morning was wet at Donington. I think I was second behind Heidfeld, Nick Heidfeld, um, on a really wet, soggy Donington. And the cars were very slow, but still quite a handful with the electric torque. Um, yeah, it was an eye opener. And then obviously we did these simulation races before we got to Beijing, and so many different techniques were being used to do a race. I mean, my team at the time, their technique was to run around at 110 kilowatts an hour flat out, and I got lapped. And this was like 3 weeks before we went to Beijing, and I got lapped, and I was thinking, oh my God, what are we doing? Like, we are nowhere. And then we had a new engineer came in, changed the philosophy. We tried one different thing. It started to work. And then, yeah, podium in the first race, won the second race. And all of a sudden people are saying that we're the favorite car. And it couldn't have been further from the truth. But yeah, it was fun. It was exciting. Do you know what? The calendar that first year was incredible. Like, where did we go? We went Beijing, Malaysia,
At Moscow that year?
Miami, Russia, London, Berlin. Yes, so many cool places. So many. Really cool venue.
It's amazing to hear how one person managed to basically U-turn that team. Because I feel like that's not the kind of thing that would happen now.
No, but back then it was very, very important. Because again, we were starting from zero. Everybody was starting from zero. And our level was zero for a long time. And it took one man to come in. His name is Patrick Curry. Yeah, you won't mind me saying what his name is. Patrick came in as my engineer, completely changed the philosophies. And yeah, all of a sudden we started to pick up some results. There were some other great people at the team as well, but he had a big voice within the team as the chief engineer. And yeah, he was integral in that first year, probably 2 years, and then he went off to Jaguar, where he still is now.
Okay. So I know that we don't have a lot of time left with you, so I want to wrap up this interview with some quick fire questions for you.
Okay.
And the first one is, what is the best car you've ever driven and the worst car you've ever driven?
Road car or race car?
Race car.
Oh, race car. Best race car I've ever driven. I mean, hard to argue with Formula One. They are fun to drive, but I'd say the most iconic one for me was when I got the opportunity to drive Damon Hill's World Championship winning car from 1996. Just because as a young Englishman, I was 9 at the time when he won that world title. And then to get the opportunity to drive that, and those engines just sound incredible. So I was very fortunate with that. And the
Okay.
worst,
And the worst
my
car?
gosh, the worst car. Well, there was a championship. I'd say it was the worst, but it was very agricultural. I drove a thing called a Formula Palmer Audi one day at Snetterton, but the old, like a really old one. Yeah, that was. I've been very lucky that every car I've driven has been quite high end. I'd say that was probably one of the lower end ones, but it wasn't bad. And I just put it out there, it wasn't bad. It's just that I did Formula BMW, Formula Renault, Formula 3, GP2, F1, Formula E, WEC, and I've driven DTM as well. They're all, how can I say any of them? I can't say any of them. It'd be doing all of them a disjustice.
Well, I'd say our resident racing driver, Bradley Philpott, used to be an instructor at Palmer Sport, and I will get his opinion
No,
on those old
no,
cars as well.
no. Like, do you know what? The funniest thing though, right? So I was watching the Formula Palmer Audi Winter Series like 10, 12 years ago. There was a young driver called Jonathan Legree. Now, I raced against Jonathan in Formula BMW, and he was doing Formula Palmer Audi Winter Series. It's on TV, and they're on the grid, and they go to Jonathan. I think he was third on the grid, and it's wet day at Brands Indy. And the commentator goes, and now we go live on board with Jonathan Legree to start. Now, it was an H-pattern gearbox for Palmer Audi, but first gear was across and down. And reverse was across and up. And he's done a cross and up for the start. He's on the limiter. Gone off the clutch. Backwards. Amazing. Yeah. Sorry, funny story.
That is, I've never heard of such a thing ever. I'll have to. That's got to be on YouTube somewhere. Just carrying on with the quick fires. Do you have a favorite racing memory?
I mean, I've got 11 good memories in Formula E so far. I'd like to make that 12 this weekend, of course. My race with Jules Bianchi when I won Monaco in World Series by Renault. So he came second. And I think me and him finished close to 40 seconds ahead of third. It was just a race between me and him. We were out on our own. I think we lapped up to like 8th place in World Series, which is pretty cool. But we were just flat out, like qualifying lap after qualifying lap. I was exhausted at the end. And Jules was like my best mate at the time. So it was awesome. That was cool. A memory I'll always have.
Who's the best teammate you've ever had?
Again, Jules was very good. I'd say Jake is right up there, you know. Jake is a great teammate. Very, very good with the data, very fast. I think under the radar fast. He should get more recognition than what he gets. Mitch obviously was very quick. I've been lucky to have some cool teammates. But yeah, Jules is a hard one to beat, to be honest.
Fair enough. And lastly, what is the best advice you've ever received?
The best advice I've ever received was from a French teacher at school. Now, he wanted to be a golfer when he was a kid. And he didn't give it his all. And then he ended up being a teacher. But he told me he woke up every morning regretting the fact that he didn't put the effort in to try and be a golfer, because then he watched some of his friends who were his age become professional golfers, making a lot of money, being on the tour and living the life of his dreams. And he was a French teacher at school. So he told me, you've got to follow your dream. You can always come back to your education. You can always get a degree later on in life. But if you've got a dream and you've got an ambition, go after it until there's nothing left. If you've exhausted it and it just didn't happen, you can hold your head up high and say, I did everything within my power to try and make it work. It just didn't happen because I wasn't quite ready or good enough. But at least you gave it a go. You don't want to live your life in regret thinking, what if? What if I'd given that a go? What if I tried? What if that had happened or that had happened and I could have been a professional driver? No, so I gave it my all, and I'm blessed that I made it to being a professional racing driver, and hopefully a successful one at that.
What was the name of that French teacher? Give him a shout out.
Mr. Noble. Mr. Noble. Thank you, Mr.
Well
Noble.
done, Mr. Noble. Because
Cheers,
I
think it's very valid advice, especially from a teacher as well. I mean, a teacher should be telling you to stay in school. And he was telling me to leave school. He was like, get out of here. Go and concentrate on your racing. So yeah, that was very refreshing and honest, open advice coming from somebody that had been through the heartache and not giving it their all.
Well, we're very grateful we did give you that advice and that you followed it as well, because it's been great watching you in Formula E and in everything else as well. I mean, that GP2 finale you mentioned as well. I remember that was the first GP2 like title showdown I had ever watched, and I was biting my nails the whole way through it. So yeah, we're very happy.
When I stalled, that was great.
Yeah, that one. I wasn't going to mention it,
but I did have some good races before that year. There were some good races. I mean, Spa was good, Monza was pretty good, Silverstone, Monaco, Bahrain. I won quite a few, so it was good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Against some decent drivers.
yeah, hopefully a few more this season as well.
Fingers crossed.
Sam,
Fingers crossed.
thank you so much for joining us, Sam. It's been an absolute pleasure, and all the best for the
Thank
rest
you
of this
very much
season.
for having me on, and yeah, see you soon.
We now return to the shed with Christopher and Christina.
We have Formula E news that we can catch up on a little bit. And most of it is looking towards the future, what Formula E is going to become. So first off the bat, we had we had the news that Yamaha and Lola are re-entering motorsports and are doing that with Formula E. They're going to be joining as a powertrain supplier, not even just for Gen 4 far into the future, but for the more immediate future of the 3.5 Evo, whatever we're calling it, generation. And that's really exciting, even if their livery looks like it comes straight out of IKEA.
I was thinking it looks more like the Napa Racing colors. If you watch racing in the UK, there's quite a few teams that run those now, and for me, that's one of the best liveries in national motorsport. That was my first sign, but I did see a lot of those IKEA comments, and they're putting it together themselves, Yamaha and Lola, in terms of their powertrain, because creating a powertrain, potentially looking to have customer teams as well. And we know, there are teams on the grid that are looking for new powertrain suppliers. Apt is one of them. Their deal with Mahindra comes to an end at the end of this season. But to have Lola and Yamaha on the grid for next season, season 11, 2025, it brings together two really big names. First of all, Lola, which, I don't know, if you haven't been a motorsport fan for so long, and you've really only been paying attention to Formula One in the last 20 years or so, might not be a familiar name to you, but this is a team that has produced thousands of different types of car for different racing series. They used to be a Formula One team. They used to create chassis in Formula 3000 back in the day. They've run in IndyCar, in sports car racing in America, and in what is now the World Endurance Championship as well. And since they shut their doors in 2012, we haven't heard much from them. But they were acquired, a couple of years ago, and the name is coming back into motorsport, which I think is just hugely, hugely exciting.
My big question is about the timeline, though, because to me it feels like this is a very quick turnaround period, but maybe I'm just having slightly different expectations from all of the hype up news that you hear on the F1 side about how big it takes of a time to build up powertrains. But it seems like with Formula E, it's a bit less of a tall order and a bit more manageable in this time frame.
Well, I think it's kind of been in the works since the Lola name was acquired a couple of years ago, because their new CEO, the name is Till Bechtelsheimer. He has quite a big history in sort of renewable energies and green sources of energy and that kind of thing, because he runs another company that specializes in that. And I think he's very much behind this push to get Lola into electric vehicles and electric vehicle technology, working with a brand like Yamaha as well. For Yamaha, obviously synonymous with the world of motorcycle racing, been a tough few years on that front in terms of like MotoGP and World Superbikes, but they used to be an F1 engine supplier way back in the 80s and 90s, right? But we haven't really seen much from them since then in terms of like the car racing or the single seater racing front. So that's really exciting for me as well. And they have in the last few years been doing electric motor development. I see on the website it says they've been taking orders for that kind of thing since 2020. And it's also just fun little detail that's on there. It's like the max power capabilities of their motors is 350 kilowatts, which just so happens to be the max power in Formula E as well. So I think as a united front, that's going to be a good partnership. Obviously, they've got a lot of catching up to do, because even with Gen 3 Evo, it will be a slightly different car, but they'll have to learn an awful lot, behind the other teams who have already will have already had a 2-year head start on knowing, how to get the best out of this particular generation of car. But that, coming in during the Evo period, when the front powertrain gets activated as well, and we go to 4-wheel drive, it's going to be a big shakeup. So yeah, they've got an awful lot to learn, but they've got, two very key members of staff from the old Techeetah team as well. First one being Mark Preston, who used to be the team principal there, and he knows how to run an underdeveloped team, let's say, a team with not too many great resources behind it. If you remember his time in Formula One at Super Aguri, and then running the Techeetah team, which was more often than not sort of underfunded, I think it's fair to say. But they still managed to get great results out of it, particularly in Formula E. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what he can do with Lola, and yeah, the Yamaha partnership as well. It's also just two really exciting names to have in Formula E.
Very exciting to have new names, new participants coming in. And when we're going into the Gen 3.5, the Evo, you said that part of it is switching up and bringing in that front powertrain and changing up the car, like the actual body of the car. Are those the two major changes that we're looking at, or is there a third cherry on top to all of that?
Yeah, I mean, we don't really know the full extent of the details yet, because we haven't seen what Gen 3 Evo is quite going to look like yet. But if we remember when they introduced sort of an Evo body kit on the first generation Formula E car, and the planned one for Gen 2 that never went ahead in order to save money after the COVID pandemic, then it's largely superficial changes, just kind of the body work, and the actual chassis itself won't really change. It'll just look a little bit different. I mean, the car that they had on show in the Tokyo race, in some of their promotional material, it was quite an aggressive looking car with extra bits of winglets and everything that won't actually do much in terms of downforce, but more aggressive styling, probably something in that general direction you can expect to see.
So look fast, be fast, kind of a feeling.
Well, it's not going to be much faster, I will say. It will look really good, but Gen 3 wasn't the big step up in performance that everyone expected. It certainly was in terms of power, but in terms of actual lap time, it wasn't. But that's where kind of Gen 4 is probably going to make the big difference.
Which, it's a pretty big jump, because we're going from 469 bhp to around 800. So that's about double. And that's a huge upgrade.
350 kilowatts to 700 for Gen 4.
That's massive. Is that making the batteries any heavier, or is this just more power?
Well, we'll see. We'll see when the battery actually gets developed. Of course, they've just had the tender out, haven't they? And I forget off the top of my head who actually is making the battery for the next generation of car, but it will be a lot more power, a lot more regen as well. Of course, the battery technology is always advancing, so the idea is that we should be able to get these cars to have this kind of pace without affecting the weight and the overall performance of the car too much. But of course, it's more than just like the power. We have potential for like semi-slick racing tires being introduced. That's going to reduce lap times massively. High and low downforce bodywork configurations as well. So Gen 4 to me seems a lot more of a performance upgrade compared to what Gen 3 was. And of course, we just had the first manufacturer sign up for Gen 4 as well.
Yes, we are going into Gen 4, and our first powertrain to commit is Nissan. They've been on the grid since, 2018 Gen 2, so they're well-versed in this, and made sense for them to announce this time around because they were at their home race in Japan. So lovely place to announce that they're heading into a new era until at least 2030 at this point.
Yeah, it's quite early to do it, but they wanted to be the first, and they wanted to do it in their home race in Tokyo as well. So yeah, really big news. The first manufacturer for Gen 4 signed up, and it makes sense for them, to sign up until the 2030. It is Gen 4 era will end. So this will actually be Nissan's longest, running motorsport program in terms of world championships anyway. So it's a massive commitment for them, and it aligns up with their own, 2030 pledge on electrification of their road vehicles as well. So yeah, makes a lot of sense, and yeah, we'll see more manufacturers, I'm sure, signing up for Gen 4 in the not too distant future.
And Nissan right now, they are the provider for obviously themselves, but what other team are we looking at potentially renewing with them?
Well, of course, McLaren is currently one of their customer team, and maybe we'll see. Maybe McLaren will want to come in with their own powertrain at some point. I'm sure they didn't really come in to be a customer team, so there could be options there for McLaren to make their own one. There could be options for other teams to get the Nissan powertrain, because really we don't really know what Gen 4 is going to look like in terms of the grid. So it's a bit early to try and predict who's going to be running what kind of customer powertrains in 2026.
It's close, but so far
Or
away at the
2027
same
even,
time.
whenever it's going to
Oh,
be.
whenever it's going to be. Formula E loves to make announcements and then push things back. Attack charge. And then we're waiting on, what is it? Jaguar or Porsche, are we thinking are the next ones that could announce their entry?
Yeah, they could do. I'm sure, like all the manufacturers that have been involved in it before, potentially BMW might want to get back into it. There needs to be, quite a clear definition of what Gen 4 is going to be, I think, before the manufacturers really sign on for it. So there'll need to be more details first, but yeah, I'm sure everyone that is currently on the grid is looking at it, and there'll be other manufacturers looking at it as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if Porsche and Jaguar followed suit, though.
Just a wait and see game at this point, but very exciting. It's always nice to look towards what might happen in the future, even though we're having a pretty stellar season this time around. It's looking good. That's a good, solid little bit of news looking forward. And speaking of looking forward, the next race that Formula E is at is Italy. We are heading to Misano. Ciao, Italia. And as it was slightly alluded to, we will not be getting attack charge, which mildly disappointing, but not at all surprising. It is a doubleheader, and we will be back, but with a single episode because we value our sanity and sleep schedules. I am here. I'm Christina. Chris Stevens is still Chris Stevens. And thank you for joining us.